Now for the body, it's the same thing. Depending upon how the finish was applied, how many finish coats, I always like to make the last 2 coats to sand really well for the last 2 coats, so that they come up pretty darn shiny like this is now. So it requires less sanding. You're really just doing it to fair in the surface. There's a little bit of a sag here, I'm embarrassed to say, from spraying. So a couple ways of taking that out. One is with a razor blade. I've shown that. A lot of people on the Gretsch discussion pages ask different techniques, and I've shown that. Here's another one. With lacquer, it's possible to just sand it out. With a polyurethane or a polyester, it's a lot harder. You'll always see it. Now, some people's eyes aren't as critical, so they don't see everything. But if you've done this enough, you can see the imperfections. If you knew where they were, it can be pretty obvious. And so what the razor blade does is it's the only system I know of from people doing it in body shops that I got that information from them. It's the only way you can do it to make it disappear, so you'll never see it again. The customer or the guitar player will never see it. They never knew it was there. But if you're the one that did it, you know it's there. And I don't like anything going out with even the most minor imperfection, because it bothers me that it's not right. And the other thing about lacquer is this is going to continue to shrink. This has been sitting around for about 3 weeks after the last coat, which is pretty much what I like to see. And that, and people ask, well, why isn't the process faster? And it's, from start to finish, to do a good lacquer job, you need 4 to 6 weeks. And that's if you get on it right away. Because you want everything to settle in. I'm still smelling solvent coming off of this. There's a couple imperfections that were in here when I got it. So I can't do anything about those. But the idea is to get the grain, to make the grain go away. And that's what we're doing with the 800. The 800 is the key to giving a level sand, to flattening out the whole guitar. And all the other sandpapers are just to get rid of the sand scratches. So we need to get the sand scratches microscopic so the eye can't see them. If you can see it started out pretty shiny, and I think I'll zoom in here. But you can see that it's gotten, I get Manny to do it, but he's talking to a neighbor. So it's much like the headstock. Just sanding it until all the grain pockets go away. And then, can't stress it enough, and the rest of the the rest of the sanding is to then get rid of the sand scratches. So the first process is leveling the surface, and the second part of the process is removing sand scratches. And that's all you're really doing with polishing anyways. And oh yeah, I was going into the process. So what I did to this was I used 2 coats of, after sanding it down to 360 grit on the wood, on the bare wood, I used some grain filler, and I tinted it black so it has that SG look to it. And then I took and then I sanded that down. I had to put some more on in the areas that didn't quite get enough. And then after that, 2 coats of, on 2 consecutive days, 2 coats of vinyl sealer. Let that dry for about 4 or 5 days, came back, sanded it, and then started applying the lacquer, the nitrocellulose lacquer. And the best way to do that is for me, that I've found is, you can put 4 coats on a day if you're careful and they're not super heavy. I put 2 on in the morning. Like, let's say this one was started and I was done sanding and the vinyl sealer was on there. So I put 2 coats of clear on in the morning, let it dry for about 12 hours because I didn't get away without sanding it. Put another 2 coats on. Let that dry overnight, sand that down to 600 and follow the same process again. Before the last sanding and the last coat of lacquer, I like it to sit for 4 days in something, a pretty warm environment. 80 is the best. You can't always get 80 though. Let it sit for 4 days. Sand it down, then let it sit for 4 days, because what that does, it allows the solvent to escape from the surface, so that as the lacquer sinks, because it's such a low solid product, that it definitely sinks into the wood, and that's why you need to wait. But like I said, I can smell solvent coming off of this stuff, so you always smell that with a lacquer guitar. I have a guitar from 1981 that every time I open the case, there's a smell of lacquer. So anyways, what I was saying was, yeah, and then let that sit for 4 days, then put 2 final coats of lacquer on, and then let that sit for a couple weeks. And after a couple weeks, break the skin surface with some 800 paper, and it'll aid in its drying process. It'll let more sun. Yeah, I know I'm cheating. I'm not using the sponge. That's because I'm doing this beauty line, and there's no way you can do that with a sponge and not risk cutting. That's something that my mom used to say about my grandfather. He told us about when you're driving a car in reverse. Imagine there's an egg on the gas pedal, and be very careful. If you can go forward for 3 blocks or back up for a few feet, go the long way. And he's telling you this, and he's walking to the car, and there's a way to go out forwards. And he gets in the car, hits the gas, puts it in reverse, hits the gas, and goes about 80 miles an hour backwards. If there was an egg on the pedal, a hard-boiled one wouldn't even survive that. So anyways, this is done with, I'm done with 800 on this right now. That's what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and finish sanding just like I did with going from 800 to 1,000 to 1,200 to 15 to 2,000. I might even do 2,500, we'll see. And then I'll show you what that looks like at the end, and then we'll take it out to the polisher and I'll polish away. You can see that for a couple seconds.